Before either of them could object, I called out in a clear, strong voice, "Eleanor James, you can come in now." The color drained from David's face so fast, I thought he might faint. My son David was standing in my living room last Tuesday afternoon at exactly 3:15. I remember the time because Judge Judy had just ended, and I was reaching for the remote to turn off the TV when I heard his knock. He was holding what looked like the most beautiful birthday card I'd ever seen. Cream-colored paper with delicate pink roses painted across the front, gold script lettering that caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through my window. "To the world's best mom," it said, in elegant cursive that reminded me of old wedding invitations. My heart just melted. You have to understand, David had been so distant lately. Short phone calls that lasted maybe 5 minutes. Quick visits where he barely sat down before making excuses to leave. I'd been lying awake at night, wondering if I'd done something wrong. If maybe I was becoming one of those clingy mothers who drives their grown children away. "Mom," he said, and his voice was so warm, so loving. The same voice that used to beg me for one more bedtime story when he was 7 years old. The same voice that called me crying when his first girlfriend broke his heart in high school. "I wanted to do something really special for your 73rd birthday next week." Behind him stood his wife, Linda, nodding and smiling like she was about to burst with excitement. They both looked so happy, so eager. Linda was even bouncing slightly on her toes, like a little girl with a secret she couldn't wait to share. "Hey, beautiful soul. Before we dive in, show some love with a like, tap subscribe, and tell me, where in this big, beautiful world are you watching from? We've been planning the most incredible surprise party for you," David continued, stepping closer to where I sat in my old recliner. The same chair where I'd rocked him to sleep as a baby, where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd watched him grow from a sweet little boy into the man standing before me. All your favorite people, your favorite chocolate cake from Rossetti's Bakery, everything absolutely perfect. I felt tears prick my eyes. After months of feeling forgotten, like I was slowly becoming invisible to the people I loved most, here was proof that my son still cared, that I still mattered to someone in this world. "We just need you to sign this birthday card first," Linda said, her voice sweet as honey dripping from a spoon. "It's part of the surprise setup. We want absolutely everything to be flawless for you, Margaret." David held out the card toward me, and I noticed his hands were trembling slightly. Just a little shake, like he was nervous about surprising me, or maybe excited about pulling off something special. It made my heart squeeze, with love, for this man I'd raised, this boy who still got worked up about making his mother happy. But when I took the card from his hands, something felt wrong. It was heavy, much heavier than any greeting card should be. Thick, like there were multiple pages tucked inside. The paper felt expensive, official somehow. "Just sign right there on the inside, Mom," David said quickly, pointing to a line with his finger. He was leaning over me now, so close I could smell his cologne. Old Spice, the same brand I'd been buying him every Christmas for the past 5 years, because he always acted like it was exactly what he wanted. "Don't worry about reading all that other stuff underneath. It's just boring legal paperwork the party venue requires for insurance." Legal paperwork for a birthday party. That made my stomach flutter with the first whisper of unease. I opened the card and saw the sweet message printed inside. "Happy birthday to a mother who deserves the world." But underneath that greeting card page, I could see layers of official-looking documents, fine print, dense paragraphs of text that definitely weren't about birthday parties or cake or surprise celebrations. I've been reading contracts and legal documents my whole adult life. 72 years of insurance policies, mortgage papers, medical forms, employment contracts. My late husband Frank used to tease me about it, saying I read the phone book like it was a best-selling novel. that I'd probably read the ingredients on cereal boxes if they printed them big enough. But that habit had saved us from crooked contractors trying to overcharge us, from insurance companies hiding fee increases in the fine print, from scam artists who thought they could take advantage of regular folks like us. So I did what I always do. I flipped past the pretty birthday message and started reading the real documents underneath. The first line made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. Durable power of attorney. I, Margaret Louise Harrison, hereby grant my son, David Michael Harrison, full and complete authority over all financial decisions, property transfers, bank accounts, real estate transactions, and medical care decisions. My hands started shaking so violently, I nearly dropped the papers. This wasn't a birthday card. This was a legal document that would give David complete control over my entire life. My house that Frank and I had paid off penny by penny over 30 years. My savings account that I'd built through 4 decades of careful budgeting and sacrifice. My right to make my own medical decisions, to choose where I lived, to control my own destiny. Everything. I looked up at my son. This man I'd carried for 9 months, delivered after 18 hours of the hardest labor any woman should have to endure. The child I'd nursed through chickenpox and broken bones and teenage heartbreak. The boy I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college, missing countless dinners and weekends so he could have a better life than Frank and I ever had. He was still smiling at me, still pretending this was about a surprise party and chocolate cake and celebration. "David," I said, my voice coming out as barely a whisper. "What is this really?" "It's nothing important, Mom," he said, his tone casual, dismissive, like I was some worried old lady fretting over nothing. "Just standard paperwork the venue needs for insurance purposes. Sign it so we can get to planning the fun stuff. Nothing important." He called signing away my independence nothing important. That's when the truth hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. My own son, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, was trying to trick me into giving him legal control over my life. He thought I was too old, too trusting, too senile to read what I was signing. He thought I wouldn't notice he was stealing everything I had left. He was about to learn that his mother hadn't raised a fool, and she sure as hell hadn't raised him to be a thief. The birthday card, that wasn't a first-person storytelling script. One, cold open, the emotional gut punch my son David was standing in my living room last Tuesday afternoon at exactly 3:15. I remember the time because Judge Judy had just ended, and I was reaching for the remote to turn off the TV when I heard his knock. He was holding what looked like the most beautiful birthday card I'd ever seen. Cream-colored paper with delicate pink roses painted across the front. Gold script lettering that caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through my window. "To the world's best mom," it said, in elegant cursive that reminded me of old wedding invitations. My heart just melted. You have to understand, David had been so distant lately. Short phone calls that lasted maybe 5 minutes. Quick visits where he barely sat down before making excuses to leave. I'd been lying awake at night, wondering if I'd done something wrong. If maybe I was becoming one of those clingy mothers who drives their grown children away. "Mom," he said, and his voice was so warm, so loving. The same voice that used to beg me for one more bedtime story when he was 7 years old. The same voice that called me crying when his first girlfriend broke his heart in high school. "I wanted to do something really special for your 73rd birthday next week." Behind him stood his wife, Linda, nodding and smiling like she was about to burst with excitement. They both looked so happy, so eager. Linda was even bouncing slightly on her toes, like a little girl with a secret she couldn't wait to share. "We've been planning the most incredible surprise party for you," David continued, stepping closer to where I sat in my old recliner, the same chair where I'd rocked him to sleep as a baby, where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd watched him grow from a sweet little boy into the man standing before me. All your favorite people, your favorite chocolate cake from Rossetti's Bakery. Everything absolutely perfect. I felt tears prick my eyes. After months of feeling forgotten, like I was slowly becoming invisible to the people I loved most, here was proof that my son still cared, that I still mattered to someone in this world. "We just need you to sign this birthday card first," Linda said, her voice sweet as honey dripping from a spoon. "It's part of the surprise setup. We want absolutely everything to be flawless for you, Margaret." David held out the card toward me, and I noticed his hands were trembling slightly. Just a little shake, like he was nervous about surprising me, or maybe excited about pulling off something special. It made my heart squeeze, with love, for this man I'd raised. This boy who still got worked up about making his mother happy. But when I took the card from his hands, something felt wrong. It was heavy, much heavier than any greeting card should be. Thick, like there were multiple pages tucked inside. The paper felt expensive, official somehow. "Just sign right there on the inside, Mom," David said quickly, pointing to a line with his finger. He was leaning over me now, so close I could smell his cologne. Old Spice, the same brand I'd been buying him every Christmas for the past 5 years, because he always acted like it was exactly what he wanted. "Don't worry about reading all that other stuff underneath. It's just boring legal paperwork the party venue requires for insurance." Legal paperwork for a birthday party? That made my stomach flutter with the first whisper of unease. I opened the card and saw the sweet message printed inside. "Happy birthday to a mother who deserves the world." But underneath that greeting card page, I could see layers of official-looking documents. Fine print. Dense paragraphs of text that definitely weren't about birthday parties, or cake, or surprise celebrations. I've been reading contracts and legal documents my whole adult life. 72 years of insurance policies, mortgage papers, medical forms, employment contracts. My late husband Frank used to tease me about it, saying I read the phone book like it was a best-selling novel, that I'd probably read the ingredients on cereal boxes if they printed them big enough. But that habit had saved us from crooked contractors trying to overcharge us, from insurance companies hiding fee increases in the fine print, from scam artists who thought they could take advantage of regular folks like us. So I did what I always do. I flipped past the pretty birthday message and started reading the real documents underneath. The first line made my blood turn to ice water in my veins. "Durable power of attorney. I, Margaret Louise Harrison, hereby grant my son, David Michael Harrison, full and complete authority over all financial decisions, property transfers, bank accounts, real estate transactions, and medical care decisions." My hands started shaking so violently, I nearly dropped the papers. This wasn't a birthday card. This was a legal document that would give David complete control over my entire life. My house that Frank and I had paid off, penny by penny, over 30 years. My savings account that I'd built through 4 decades of careful budgeting and sacrifice. My right to make my own medical decisions, to choose where I lived, to control my own destiny. Everything. I looked up at my son. This man I'd carried for 9 months, delivered after 18 hours of the hardest labor any woman should have to endure. The child I'd nursed through chickenpox and broken bones and teenage heartbreak. The boy I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college, missing countless dinners and weekends so he could have a better life than Frank and I ever had. He was still smiling at me, still pretending this was about a surprise party and chocolate cake and celebration. "David," I said, my voice coming out as barely a whisper. "What is this really?" "It's nothing important, Mom," he said, his tone casual, dismissive, like I was some worried old lady fretting over nothing. "Just standard paperwork the venue needs for insurance purposes. Sign it so we can get to planning the fun stuff. Nothing important," he called, signing away my independence. Nothing important. That's when the truth hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. My own son, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, was trying to trick me into giving him legal control over my life. He thought I was too old, too trusting, too senile to read what I was signing. He thought I wouldn't notice he was stealing everything I had left. He was about to learn that his mother hadn't raised a fool, and she sure as hell hadn't raised him to be a thief. 2 months ago, everything in my world felt peaceful and right. I'm 72 years old, been living in the same house for 40 years now. The house Frank and I bought when David was just 3 years old, back when this neighborhood was nothing but farmland and big dreams. Frank's been gone 8 years now, but I've kept everything exactly the way we left it. His coffee mug still sits in the kitchen cabinet. His reading glasses are still on the nightstand, next to his side of the bed. Some people think that's sad, but it brings me comfort, like he's still here with me somehow. I had my routines, my independence. Every morning at 6:30, I'd make my coffee and sit at the kitchen table with the newspaper spread out in front of me. Not just the headlines like most folks do. I read every single article, every advertisement, even those tiny legal notices in the back that most people skip right over. Frank used to tease me about it when he was alive. "Margaret," he'd say, shaking his head with that gentle smile of his, "you read everything, like you're studying for the most important test of your life." But that habit had served us well over the years. I'd caught insurance companies trying to sneak in premium increases, spotted mistakes on our mortgage papers that would have cost us thousands, even found errors on medical bills that the hospital tried to slip past us. I was managing just fine on my own, thank you very much. Still driving myself to the grocery store twice a week. Still balancing my checkbook to the penny every month. Still climbing up on a step stool to change light bulbs when they burned out, despite David's constant worrying about me falling. Every Sunday, David would come by with Linda for our weekly visit. We'd sit out on the front porch if the weather was nice, or around the kitchen table if it was cold. I'd make coffee, and usually had some kind of cake or cookies ready. David always said my chocolate chip cookies were still the best he'd ever tasted. Those Sunday afternoons were the highlight of my week. David would tell me about his job at the insurance company, about the clients he was helping, about the new policies they were rolling out. Linda would mostly listen, sometimes chiming in with stories about her work at the dentist's office or her book club meetings. I thought they were being good, dutiful children. David would always find little things to fix around the house. A squeaky door hinge that needed oil. A loose handle on one of my kitchen cabinets. The kind of small maintenance tasks that Frank used to take care of, that I struggled with now that my arthritis was acting up more often. "You don't have to do that, honey," I'd always tell him, but David would just wave me off. "It's no trouble, Mom. I want to make sure you're safe and comfortable here." Linda would walk around the house sometimes while David was fixing things, looking at the furniture, commenting on how well I kept everything. "You have such beautiful antiques, Margaret," she'd say, running her fingers along Frank's old desk or the china cabinet we'd bought for our 10th wedding anniversary. I thought she was just being polite, maybe a little interested in family history. David had always been proud of the home Frank and I had built, of the memories we'd made in every room. After they'd leave on Sunday evenings, I'd feel so grateful. Grateful to have a son who still cared about his old mother. Grateful that Linda seemed to genuinely like me, even though I knew some daughters-in-law saw their husbands' mothers as burdens or competition. I'd clean up the coffee cups and put away the leftover cake, thinking how lucky I was, how blessed Frank and I had been to raise such a thoughtful, responsible son. A son who'd found a nice wife and was building a good life. I had my independence, my home, my health, and my family. At 72, I couldn't ask for much more than that. My savings account was healthy, from a lifetime of careful spending and Frank's modest life insurance policy. The house was paid off. I had everything I needed to live comfortably for the rest of my days. Those Sunday visits were proof that I'd done something right as a mother, that David still valued our relationship, still wanted me to be part of his life. I never imagined that while I was making coffee and cutting cake, he was planning how to take it all away from me. But then, about 6 weeks ago, David started asking questions that made my stomach twist with unease. It started small. We were sitting on my front porch on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in September, watching the neighbor kids ride their bikes up and down the street. I was telling David about how I'd finally gotten around to cleaning out the attic, sorting through some of Frank's old papers and photographs. "Mom," David said, setting down his coffee cup with a little too much force, "don't you think this house is getting too big for you to handle?" I blinked, surprised. "Too big? Honey, I've been managing it just fine for 8 years, since your father passed." I know, he said quickly. But his voice had this new tone, concerned, but also calculating somehow. "It's just that you're getting older. All these stairs, the big yard, the maintenance. Wouldn't a nice little apartment be easier?" Linda nodded from her chair, jumping in faster than usual. "David's right, Margaret. My mother downsized last year, and she says it's the best decision she ever made. No more worrying about the roof or the plumbing or keeping up with yard work." I felt my back stiffen. I like my yard work, and there's nothing wrong with my roof. But David pressed on. "What happens if you get sick, Mom? Who's going to handle your finances if something happens to you? Have you thought about setting up some kind of safety net?" The way he said safety net made my skin crawl, though I couldn't put my finger on why. The next Sunday, he brought it up again. This time, he was more direct. "Mom, I've been thinking, maybe I should be added to your bank accounts. You know, just in case of emergencies. If you had a fall or ended up in the hospital, someone would need to pay your bills." My hands tightened around my coffee mug. "David, I've been paying my own bills since before you were born. I think I can manage a little while longer." "Of course you can," Linda said sweetly. But there was something sharp underneath her smile. "We're just thinking ahead, being responsible." Then came the lies. Small ones at first, but they added up like drops of poison in a well. David told me that Dr. Martinez had called him about my blood pressure medication. Said the doctor was concerned about my memory and thought maybe I needed someone else managing my prescriptions. But when I called Dr. Martinez's office the next day, his nurse was confused. "Mrs. Harrison, we've never spoken to your son. We don't even have his contact information in your file." Another time, Linda mentioned she'd seen me at the grocery store looking confused about something, standing in the cereal aisle like I didn't know where I was. "I was reading the ingredients," I told her firmly, "on a box of granola bars. Same thing I always do." But she just gave me that pitying look, like I was some poor old woman making excuses for her failing mind. David started asking about my will too. Casual questions that felt anything but casual. "Have you updated your estate planning lately, Mom? When's the last time you talked to a lawyer about your wishes?" "My will is fine, David. It's been the same for years. But things change," he insisted. "Tax laws, property values. You should really have someone review it. Make sure everything's in order." The way he said "someone" made me think he had a specific someone in mind. Then there were the phone calls. David started calling me during the week, not just on Sundays. But these weren't the warm, chatty conversations we used to have. "How are you feeling today, Mom? Any dizziness? Confusion? Any trouble remembering things? Paying bills on time? Are you eating enough? Sleeping okay? Maybe we should look into getting you some help around the house." Every conversation felt like a test. I was somehow failing, even though I felt perfectly fine. Better than fine, actually. At 72, I was sharper than most people, half my age. But David and Linda kept looking at me like I was a fragile piece of glass about to shatter, like I was some tragic figure who needed their protection and guidance. The worst part was how they'd exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Quick, meaningful looks that said more than their words ever did, like they were keeping score of something. building a case for something I didn't understand yet. I started feeling watched, judged, like every small mistake or moment of forgetfulness was being cataloged and stored away for some future purpose. When I spilled a little coffee on my blouse one Sunday, Linda practically gasped, "Oh, Margaret, are your hands shaking? Maybe we should ask the doctor about that." When I couldn't immediately remember the name of my new next-door neighbor, David frowned with concern. "Memory problems, Mom? How long has this been going on?" I wasn't having memory problems. I was having son problems. But I didn't know how to say that without sounding paranoid or ungrateful. All I knew was that the boy who used to call me twice a week just to chat was now calling me every other day to check up on my mental state, and the woman who used to quietly sip coffee on my porch was now studying me like I was a science experiment. Something was building, something I couldn't name yet, but I could feel it in my bones, like a storm coming. So there I was, last Tuesday, sitting in my recliner with that beautiful birthday card in my hands, feeling the weight of those hidden papers underneath the pretty message. David and Linda were both standing over me now, close enough that I could feel the heat from their bodies. Linda's perfume was too strong, too sweet, making me feel dizzy. David kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, like he couldn't stand still. "Just sign right there, Mom," David said again, his voice tighter now, more insistent. He was pointing at that line with his finger, tapping it like I was too stupid to see it the first time. "We really need to get moving on this party planning." But I couldn't stop staring at those legal documents underneath. My eyes kept scanning the dense paragraphs of text, and every word I read made my heart beat faster. Durable power of attorney, full authority over financial decisions, property transfers, medical care decisions, nursing home placement. Nursing home placement. My breath caught in my throat. "David," I said slowly, not looking up from the papers. "What does this mean? This part about nursing homes?" I heard Linda suck in a sharp breath. When I glanced up, David's face had gone pale, but he forced a smile. "That's just standard legal language, Mom. Covers all the bases. You know how lawyers are with their fancy words." But I kept reading, and what I found next made my blood turn to ice. In the event of mental incapacity, as determined by the above-named agent, David would be my agent. He would get to decide if I was mentally incapacitated. He would get to decide where I lived, how my money was spent, what medical care I received, everything. "This says you can sell my house," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the roaring in my ears. "It says you can put me in a facility against my will." "Mom, you're misreading it," David said quickly, but sweat was beading on his forehead now. "It's just precautionary, in case something happens to you someday, way down the road." Someday? I looked up at him, this man I'd nursed through chickenpox and helped with algebra homework and cheered for at every baseball game. "Or next week? After you get control of everything I own?" Linda stepped forward, her voice syrupy sweet, but with an edge of panic. "Margaret, you're getting yourself all worked up over nothing. David loves you. We both do. We just want to make sure you're protected." Protected? From what? From living in my own home? From making my own decisions? I flipped through more pages, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers steady. There were bank documents, property transfer forms, even what looked like brochures for assisted living facilities. "You've already been looking at nursing homes," I said, my voice getting stronger, angrier. "These are applications, partially filled out." David's mask was slipping now. The concerned son act was cracking around the edges. "Mom, you're 72 years old. You live alone in a big house. What happens when you fall down those stairs? What happens when you forget to turn off the stove?" "I've never forgotten to turn off the stove in my life." "What happens when you can't remember to take your medications? When you get confused and lost driving to the store?" Linda nodded vigorously. We've seen the signs, Margaret. The forgetfulness, the confusion. We're just trying to plan ahead before something terrible happens. The signs. What signs? I was sharper than most people, half my age. I balanced my checkbook to the penny every month. I read every word of every contract, every insurance policy, every medical form. That's when it hit me like a punch to the gut. That's exactly why they needed to get rid of me. You're afraid I'll read the fine print, I said quietly. You're afraid I'll figure out what you're really doing. David's jaw tightened. What we're really doing is trying to help you, but you're too stubborn to see it. Help me? By stealing my house? By taking control of my money? By locking me away somewhere so I can't stop you? We're not stealing anything, Linda snapped, her sweet mask finally slipping completely. David is your son. He deserves to inherit eventually anyway. We're just making sure everything's handled properly. Eventually. But they weren't talking about eventually. They were talking about now. Today. While I was still alive and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. I looked down at those papers again, seeing them clearly for what they really were. Not protection, not love, not concern for my welfare. They were a legal kidnapping, a way to make me disappear without actually killing me. You planned this, I said, my voice steady now, despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. This whole thing, the birthday card, the surprise party story. You've been setting this up for weeks. David opened his mouth to deny it, but I held up my hand. All those questions about the house being too big. All those lies about doctors calling you, making me seem confused and incompetent. You've been building a case against me. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda looked like she wanted to run. David's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Sign the papers, Mom, he said finally. And his voice was different now, colder. We're trying to do this the easy way. The easy way. Which meant there was a hard way, too. That's when I knew for certain. My own son, the child I'd given everything to, was trying to steal my life. And if I didn't find a way to stop him, he was going to succeed. I took a deep breath and carefully set the pen down on my coffee table. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. David and Linda were watching me like hawks, waiting for my next move. You know what? I said, forcing my voice to stay calm and steady. Let me take this to my bedroom and read through everything properly. You know how I am with paperwork, honey. David's smile faltered for just a second. Mom, it's really not necessary. It's just a birthday card and some standard forms. Nothing complicated. I always read everything, sweetheart, I said, looking him straight in the eye. You've known that about me your whole life. Remember when you were 12 and wanted that expensive bike for Christmas? I read every word of the financing agreement before I signed it. I saw him exchange a quick glance with Linda. Panic flickered across both their faces, like shadows from a passing cloud. Besides, I continued, gathering up the papers with hands that were steadier than I felt. This is such an important document. If I'm signing away, if I'm signing something this significant, I want to make sure I understand every detail. Linda stepped forward, her voice strained. Margaret, we really don't have a lot of time. The party venue needs these forms back today for the insurance. Insurance, right. Then they'll just have to wait, I said firmly. Good decisions aren't made in a hurry. That's something Frank taught me, and it served us well for 43 years of marriage. I stood up slowly, clutching those papers against my chest like a shield. I'll just be a few minutes. Make yourselves comfortable. But here's what David and Linda didn't know about their supposedly confused, helpless old mother. I wasn't just some lonely widow who'd spent her life baking cookies and tending gardens. I was a retired paralegal. 32 years, working at Brennan, Wilson, and Associates, one of the biggest estate law firms in the county. I'd processed hundreds of power of attorney documents. I knew exactly what every clause meant, every loophole, Every way these papers could be used to destroy someone's life. More importantly, I knew exactly what was legal and what wasn't. And what David was trying to do, getting someone to sign legal documents under false pretenses, that wasn't just unethical. That was fraud. I also knew something else they'd forgotten about me. I wasn't isolated like they thought. I had connections. Real connections with people who knew the law. People who owed me favors from my years in the legal field. In my bedroom, I moved quickly, but quietly. First, I took photos of every single page with my phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady, precise, focused. This was what I'd been trained to do. Then, I opened my nightstand drawer and pulled out my address book. The real one, with phone numbers written in pen, not stored in some computer that could crash or be hacked. Mrs. Chen, my former boss, and now one of the most respected estate attorneys in the state. If anyone could help me understand my options, it was her. James, my nephew, Frank's sister's boy. Detective with the county sheriff's department for 15 years. If David was planning to defraud me, James would know how to stop him. And Dr. Martinez, my real doctor, who could provide documentation that I was mentally competent. Despite whatever lies David might have been spreading, I sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by evidence of my son's betrayal, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. Not the kind of power David was trying to steal from me. Real power. The power that comes from knowledge, from preparation, from having spent decades learning exactly how the system works. David thought he was dealing with a helpless old woman who'd sign anything you put in front of her. He'd forgotten he was dealing with someone who'd built her entire career on protecting people from exactly this kind of predator. His mistake was about to become my advantage. I sat on the edge of my bed for a moment, listening to David and Linda's muffled voices through the bedroom door. They were arguing in harsh whispers, probably wondering how long I was going to take, whether their plan was falling apart. Let them wonder. I picked up my phone and dialed Mrs. Chen's direct number. After 3 rings, her familiar voice answered. Eleanor Chen speaking. Eleanor, it's Margaret Harrison. I need your help with something urgent. There was immediate concern in her voice. Eleanor and I had worked together for over 20 years before I retired. She knew I didn't call for frivolous reasons. What's happening, Margaret? I kept my voice low, but steady. My son just tried to trick me into signing a power of attorney document, disguised it as a birthday card. I have photos of everything. The silence on the other end was brief, but telling. Margaret, are you somewhere safe right now? I'm in my bedroom. They're in the living room, waiting for me to come back and sign. Do not sign anything. What you're describing is fraud. Elder abuse. Are you able to get the documents to me? I can email you the photos, right now. Do it. I'm canceling my afternoon appointments. This is serious, Margaret. If your son is willing to forge documents and lie to get your signature, he's probably planning something much bigger. While I sent the photos, Eleanor stayed on the line. I could hear her typing, probably clearing her schedule. Margaret, I'm also calling Detective Morrison at the county sheriff's office. We need to document this properly. Actually, I said, feeling a small smile cross my face. For the first time that day, I have a better idea. My nephew James is a detective there, Frank's sister's boy. He's been waiting 15 years for me to need his help with something. Perfect. Call him right now. I'm going to prepare an emergency restraining order and some protective documents for your assets. How long can you stall them? As long as I need to. I told them I always read everything carefully. They know that about me. Good. Use that. Make them think you're just being thorough. I'll call Dr. Martinez too. We'll need documentation of your mental competence in case they try to claim you're incapacitated. After I hung up with Eleanor, I called James. He answered on the first ring. Aunt Margaret, everything okay? James, I need you to come to my house, but not with sirens or a squad car. Just you, quietly. Your cousin David is here trying to steal my life savings in my house. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't sign anything, and don't let them leave. They're not going anywhere. They think they're about to get everything they want. My last call was to Dr. Martinez's office. His nurse, Patricia, had known me for years. Mrs. Harrison, how are you feeling? I'm feeling sharp as a tack, Patricia. But I need Dr. Martinez to document that officially. My son is trying to claim I'm mentally incompetent. That's ridiculous. You're one of our most alert patients. Let me get the doctor. Dr. Martinez came on the line within minutes. Margaret, what's this about mental incompetence? David's trying to trick me into signing legal documents. He's been telling people I'm confused, forgetful. I need you to write a letter stating my actual mental condition. I'll have that ready within the hour. Margaret, you're sharper than most people half your age. Anyone who knows you would laugh at claims of incompetence. I hung up and looked at myself in the bedroom mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't some helpless victim. She was someone who'd spent 32 years learning exactly how to protect people from predators like David. I smoothed my blouse, took a deep breath, and walked back toward the living room where my son and his wife were waiting. They thought they were setting a trap for a confused old lady. They had no idea they'd just walked into mine. I walked back into the living room, carrying those papers like I was holding a regular birthday card. David and Linda both looked up at me with expressions that were trying to be casual, but failing miserably. David's leg was bouncing nervously, and Linda kept glancing toward the front door, like she was planning an escape route. Well, I said, settling back into my recliner with a sweet smile. I've read through everything very carefully. You're absolutely right, David. This is quite an important document. Relief flooded both their faces. David leaned forward eagerly. So you understand now? It's really just for your protection, Mom. We want to make sure you're taken care of. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, reaching for the pen on my coffee table. In fact, I understand so well that I think we should do this properly. With witnesses. David blinked. Witnesses? Of course. A document this important should be witnessed by qualified people. People who understand exactly what's happening here. Before either of them could object, I called out in a clear, strong voice. Eleanor, James, you can come in now. The front door opened, and Eleanor Chen walked in carrying her leather briefcase, looking every inch the formidable attorney she was. Behind her came James in his detective uniform, his badge clearly visible, his hand resting casually near his radio. The color drained from David's face so fast I thought he might faint. Linda actually took a step backward, bumping into the wall. Mom, what's going on? David's voice came out as a croak. I'm making sure everything is done legally, I said calmly. Eleanor Chen, this is my son David and his wife Linda. Eleanor was my supervisor for 20 years at Brennan, Wilson & Associates. She's also one of the state's leading experts on elder fraud. Eleanor set her briefcase down and pulled out a thick folder. David, Linda, I've reviewed the documents you asked Mrs. Harrison to sign. I have to say, in 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen such a blatant attempt at financial exploitation. This is insane, Linda sputtered. We're family. We love Margaret. We're just trying to help her. James stepped forward, and his voice was calm, but carried the unmistakable authority of law enforcement. Ma'am, fraud is fraud, regardless of family relationships. In fact, elder abuse by family members carries enhanced penalties under state law. David was shaking now, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. This is just paperwork for Mom's birthday party. Birthday party? Eleanor opened her folder and pulled out the documents I'd photographed. This power of attorney would give you complete control over your mother's finances, property, and medical decisions. These nursing home applications are already partially filled out. And this, she held up another paper. This is a quitclaim deed, transferring your mother's house to your name. I watched David's face as each document was revealed. The lies he'd built were crumbling around him like a house of cards in a windstorm. I also took the liberty of running a financial background check, James added, pulling out his own folder. David, you're currently 3 months behind on your mortgage payments. Your credit cards are maxed out. You've lost over $15,000 gambling in the past 6 months. Linda let out a small whimper. David's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. You needed my money to save your house, I said, my voice steady and clear. You needed to get rid of me so you could sell my home and use the proceeds to pay your debts. And when that money ran out, Eleanor continued, you planned to have your mother declared incompetent and placed in state-funded care while you enjoyed her life savings. That's not true. David finally found his voice, but it was desperate, panicked. I would never hurt my mother. This is all a mistake. We were just trying to plan ahead. Plan ahead. I stood up, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was towering over my son instead of being looked down upon. You mean plan my funeral while I was still alive to watch? James stepped closer to David, his hand now definitely resting on his handcuffs. David Harrison, you have the right to remain silent. Wait, David said, his voice breaking. Wait, Mom, please, we can work this out. I'll tear up the papers. We'll forget this ever happened. I looked at this man who used to be my little boy, this person I'd raised to be honest and kind and good, this stranger who'd been willing to steal my life to save his own. The only thing I'm going to forget, David, is that I ever had a son. Eleanor pulled out another set of documents. Mrs. Harrison, these are the papers you're actually going to sign today. A new will removing David as beneficiary, a restraining order preventing him from entering your property, and a formal complaint for attempted elder fraud. I took the pen and signed my name with hands that were perfectly steady. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that David had tried to steal. When I finished, I looked up at my son one last time. You could have just asked me for help, David. If you'd been honest about your problems, I might have found a way to assist you. But the moment you decided to lie to me, to trick me, to treat me like I was already dead, that's when you stopped being my son. James put his hand on David's shoulder. Sir, you're going to need to come with me. As they led David toward the door, he turned back with tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Neither did I said quietly. Neither did I. That was 6 months ago. I'm still in my house, still reading every word of every piece of paper that comes across my table. David and Linda lost their house, moved somewhere across the state. I haven't heard from them since, and that's fine by me. I changed my will. Everything goes to James and his kids now. People who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. The hardest part wasn't losing David. It was accepting that the little boy I raised, the one I sacrificed everything for, could look me in the eye and try to steal my life away. But you know what? I'm at peace with it now. Some people might say I was too harsh, that I should have forgiven him, helped him out of his mess. But here's the thing about family in America. We're supposed to take care of each other, not take advantage of each other. The moment David decided to trick me, instead of asking for help, he stopped being the son I raised. He became a stranger, trying to steal from an old lady. And this old lady doesn't go down without a fight. I'm 73 now, and I've never felt stronger, because I learned that the most important thing you can do is protect yourself from people who would hurt you, even when those people share your blood. They thought they were dealing with some helpless old woman who'd sign anything you put in front of her. They forgot they were dealing with someone who spent her whole life reading the fine print. Their mistake, my freedom, and I sleep just fine with that. The people who try to trick you into giving up your power have already shown you exactly why you should never give it up.